welcome to
Bean Stuff.
Today we are talking on our second part in the series we're going to do on cupping. And today we're going to be talking more about the procedure and what you're actually going to be doing in that cupping.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I learned right from the beginning and needed to learn as a roaster. And it is something I found it so important. You've got to be doing this. It's like having a left and right hand. You've got to have both.
Right. I mean, it is such a, as we talked about in the last episode, it is really crucial to everything you're doing as a roaster, even as a consumer of coffee. So what do we mean by cupping procedure? Dad, I think you had an example of a flat tire. Was that correct?
Oh, I did. Yes, it was that whole thing of you can know about I need to change a flat tire. You've heard about it from your dad or your mum. But when it comes to change a flat tire, you're out there in I'm going to say the wop-wops,
wilderness,
in the boonies. You need to know the procedure. What is step one? And you suddenly go, I don't know what step one is. I don't know where to start when I change my tire. And cupping is very similar. Where do you start? You've never been told.
Right. And I mean, yesterday we recorded it, but it might not come out in that sequence. But we recorded and we kind of talked about our general scope, but we didn't really go into too much of the details of the actual, what do you need, what do you do, and at what points. So this is kind of the nuts and bolts of, how are we actually cupping? Mm-hmm. So the first thing is setting up for the cupping. And we... we'll get to the math in a second here, but the first thing it seems fairly obvious, but is having clean, dry cups that are the correct size.
That's right. And it seems obvious, but you'll be surprised. You can wash cups and find it's got residue there. And when you cup coffee, you want everything to be the same time in, time out. You want it to be clean every time. Otherwise, you will very faintly may even taste something that was in there once before.
And I think what's also important is the cup size. I think we mentioned it in the last episode, but was that the cups need to be 7 to 9 ounces as far as how much they can hold, and then they need to be a 3.5 to 3 inch mouth for the opening of it, so we can get the right fragrance and all those. We can smell correctly there.
And they even need a certain diameter on the top, so when you put your nose down, you can actually smell something.
That's the mouth that we.
You said that. Thank you, Reed.
And then
did I say about the diameter of the cup, the top?
No, but we should talk about the diameter of the cups.
Carry on.
But the other thing is going to be you need the cups for the actual coffee, but you also need some extra cups for the spoons.
You need extra cups for the spoons that you're going to put hot water in, and you're going to dip that in every time, so there's no cross-contamination. You also need a couple of cups, depends how much, that you can spit out into the cups, just the dregs, and you're going to break the crust, and you're going to take the crust off the top. You're going to put that somewhere. Those spare cups are really helpful.
Yeah, and those don't have to obviously be the same. But,
no, that's
if
fine.
you're buying cups, you might as well buy them all the same.
Just get them all.
The next thing you want to do, once you have your cups,
and I would say,
how many cups are we going to have?
I was just going to say that in a professional cupping, you would always have 5 cups. And the reason for 5...
Now, 5 cups for each coffee that you're cupping, or?
5 cups for each coffee. So if you're going to cup 2 different coffees, you're going to compare 2 coffees, you're going to buy 2 coffees, whatever it may be. If you've got, for instance, a Sumatra and Costa Rica, you will have 5 cups of Sumatra, and you'll have another 5 cups of Costa Rica, all the same.
Gotcha. And those are almost like, I think of it like 5 samples. So you get 5 individual samples, so you can kind of rule out any anomalies that might come up, and you can also measure consistency.
Consistency's there too. Each one's exactly the same. It's going to be the grind size is going to be exactly the same. But as you said, if there's you're going to grind them all separately too, rather than grind it all at the same time. You're going to grind it separately so that you can find if there's a defect in there, you want to know about it. If it's just in 1 cup, that's not going to be as bad. If it's in all 5 cups, it's uniform right across the board that this has got a defect in it.
Absolutely. And I think you had said that in what you just said, but weighing out the coffee. So we're going to put the correct amount of whole bean coffee as far as weight into each physical cup. So each cup has the right weight in it, and we looked it up, and with like the Roasters Guild, they clarify 150 grams of coffee per...
No.
No, it's 8.5 grams of
Yeah,
coffee.
that's a lot of coffee.
Per 150 milliliters of water.
That's correct.
Um,
And you're going to find that out. Every cup's different. You want the same cups you are using, but as long as you uniform on the 5 cups you have, you could have a 150 ml cup with 8.5, but you may find you've got a 200 ml cup. So therefore, how much coffee do you put in? You know, it's going to be a little more than 8.5 because you've got more water going on there. Yeah. And Reed and I had a wonderful...
far too long.
Far too long.
It was like going back into middle school algebra.
It was, and it reminded me of that very much. Oh man, this is like a nightmare.
But the equation we eventually summarized to is basically you take your cup size in milliliters.
And just to say how you do that, you will put your cup on a scale and you'll tear it so it's 0. Then you'll pour water into it till it's right at the brim, just at the top. And that mils is going to be pretty equivalent.
Well, that's going to give you grams. That won't give you milliliters.
No, what I'm saying, it's going to be equivalent to grams.
Right.
So
sorry, yes.
You'll weigh it, but it's going to be the same as mils, vice versa.
Gotcha.
And so now you know how much is your cup will take, what's the capacity. And if you find it's 150 grams, well, you're going to put 8.5 grams of coffee in. If you find it's 200 grams, what's the formula we found?
Well, we found that if you take the 200, so you can think of 200 as the cup size, how much your cup contains, and you divide it by 150. And then whatever number you get, so in that case, we get 1.33. You times that by 8.5, and I think you get like 11.13 or something like that.
Yeah.
But basically, you take your size or how many milliliters of water your cup can hold, and you just divide it by 150, take that number, and multiply it by 8.5. And that's going to give you the amount of whole beans you need in each cup. So then you can put your cup on a scale, tear it, and then put in, in this case, 11.13, or we could have that wrong. But the equation is correct.
That sounds right. And what we're doing is we're trying to make a standard here. And the standard officially was 150 mils. Therefore, you'll have 8.5 grams. That's why that's in that formula. And now you just, from that formula, you work out, I got a bigger cup, a smaller cup.
It's essentially just a ratio. We're just moving that up and down, scaling it for the cup size.
We're probably making this way harder than it should be.
We'll have to put the thing in the show notes as well. Here's what the equation is.
6 pages.
Yeah, I know. All of our scratch notes. And then the other thing we're going to want to do as we're starting to get ready, so once you've got the coffee in the cups, the whole bean coffee, it's not ground yet, you're going to want to set up the rest of the table. And why do we want the rest of the table set up before we grind the coffee, Dad?
Oh, that's because once you start the timer, once you put the hot water in, you start the whole process of cupping, you won't be able to stop and suddenly set up the table and do other things. The water, the temperature's changing, the coffee flavor's changing, so you want to have it all ready to go. So when you push the timer and the hot water starts going in the coffee, you are ready.
It's like a classic movie where you have a bomb with a timer on it. Once you start grinding the coffee, that timer is kicked off, and there's nothing you can do. And the explosion, obviously, in this case, is the cupping experience. That's right. It's not an explosion.
Wonderful explosion.
Yeah, explosion of flavor.
Exactly.
So when we're setting up the rest of the table, you may want to label what coffees are what. Obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but when you're cupping, the 5 cups that are next to each other are going to be all the same coffee. And then if you have another coffee, you'll have another set of 5 cups. And you may or may not want to label those.
That's right. They call that in the industry, they call it blind cupping, just that you can't see, so you're not prejudiced in terms of, I love Sumatra coffee. This is going to get a high score compared to what Costa Rica you got next to you there.
Yeah.
So,
well, like we talked about in the other episode, takes kind of that subjectivity out of it a little bit.
And you're wanting to do that. I would start by labeling it just to get used to it and get the procedure underway, what temperature is the water boiled, all these things that you're going to be doing. And then you can start moving quickly to blind cupping. Blind cupping, I sometimes get confused by it because what are you going to do? You're not going to be blind. You're going to see stuff, but you're going to put a label underneath the cup. We do it by putting, getting the bags. If we've got 2 coffees, we'll turn them around, mix them up, put a number on each of them, and then that number, if it's number 1, we'll put that with number 1 and number 2 with number 2.
Right.
You'll work that out, but yeah.
And
blind.
I think that's all part of the process. The other thing is having all your spoons in the right place. We talked about having a separate cup for your spoons, but just getting those out so everything's ready once the coffee's ground. We start that process.
Yes.
Forms and pens. One of the things that we encouraged in the last time we talked about cupping was the taking of notes. And there's a couple different apps out there.
I know of two. There's, I think it's called Odor, and there's another one that was a more original cupping. I can't remember what it was called actually, but we used it a lot. And it was both those relate to the SCA, the Specialty Coffee Association's form very clearly, and it just makes it all easier.
And I will say we'll put a link to the SCA sheet as well, because it's got a really good sheet of.
It is. It's free. You can just pick it up and
that's what
print
you
it
use, right? You use that.
We do
sheet.
Always. Yep. It's just, and get used to one sheet. And there's a lot of them out there. Intelligentsia has one. What's the one I have here of obsessive coffee or whatever? They all have their different ones, and they're all pretty good. Just keep with one, and
as long as you're consistent with what you're using to measure all of your cupping, so that way they can equally be compared to each other.
I should say by that's a book, Coffee Obsession, I was trying to get out, and that's a good book for generally if you want to know a little bit about coffee and know that it's correct what it's saying. That's a good one.
Yeah, no, you've been pulling some good information from that even this weekend.
Yes.
And then the other thing is a timer. You're going to want to have a timer so we can time the extraction process, all those different pieces there. And then something that you may not think about, you may not need it, but a place to spit out your coffee. You may be thinking, why would you want to spit out your coffee? But Dad, I think when you were in Brazil, how many cups of coffee did you taste in a day?
Oh, a lot. We had up to 80 different coffees, and that's 80 times 5 cups each, and it gets a lot of coffee. And you want to, they call it a spittoon. They're wonderful looking things. But
are they really that wonderful?
Well, until you have to empty them. But having just a spare cup that you can spit out the water so you don't have to drink too much. I don't think if you're doing this at home, it's not going to be such a problem because you're not going to be doing a lot. So, and one part of the cupping, the aftertaste, you need to swallow it to see what the aftertaste is like.
Right, and I think that again, if you're doing home cupping, it's not as crucial because you're more likely to want to just enjoy the coffee as well. But in a professional setting, that can be a thing because you might be tasting, like you had said, 80 different cups of coffee or however many. Yeah. But it's going to add to how much coffee you're having a day. So a place to do that if you need to. Once you've got kind of that I think of it like the structure. Like once you've got everything in place to then do the next section, you can move to that. And that's,
did we say about even the table we might have mentioned on a previous episode?
We talked about it in the other episode a little bit, but having the correct table size and stuff like that can help.
Particularly the height, just so you're not bending down too low, and it's just you can just sip it straight away and straight to your mouth, and there's no gap. Yeah,
and we do have some more on that in the our previous episode that you can take a look at. But the next thing would be grinding. A super important process in coffee. We have an episode on grinders as well. I'm sure we've mentioned it several times, but it is an extremely important part. And actually something that I don't know why I didn't think about it, but you had said take a little bit extra from the coffee that you're going to be cupping, put it through your grinder.
You want to purge that grinder
before you're not going to use any of those grounds for actually cupping, but you're just going to use those, like you said, to purge it and to clean it out.
You got some coffee left over, residue there from previous coffees. You want to make sure it's the same coffee coming through, and you're the grinder you're going to tap, you're going to bang on it to make sure everything's out. And so then you're ready to grind for your 5 cups.
Like on, at home, you're not necessarily going to see it, but on some professional or industrial kind of grinders, you have that little thing on the side you can tap, and it taps everything in there and loosens up all the loose grind. And then do we grind the cups all at the same time or individually, Dad?
Individually.
And why is that?
You want to grind them individually, one, so you get the 8.5 correct every time. But also if there is a defect of some type in there, if there's an insect defect, if there's a mold in there, whatever, there's lots of different defects. You want to make sure it may be just one bean, and that one bean will just be in 1 cup as such rather than in all cups. And when we grade the coffee, you come to our form, if you're going to look at one part of that one category is on defects. If it has no defects, wonderful, you're going to get 10 points. If you have a defect, you're going to get 2 points per cup. Right. So if there's only 1 cup, you're only going to get 2 points taken off you. So that's better than having 10 points of all 5 cups have a defect.
Yeah, and that was a lot of scoring just now. So
sorry,
that
I
might be
carried
something
away.
Else. But and I guess to kind of tack on to that, we will add again a link to the SCA sheet with the scoring that you're.
Yeah, they have a good sheet there too on just the procedure that we're sort of talking about here. The cups Also, you want to do it one at a time, and so you'll grind your 8.5 beans that you've already weighed out. You'll put them in the top of the grinder or whatever you do, grind that out and tap it, whatever. And then you will put the next 8.5 grams in and do, as you say, do separate cups for each of them, and then those cups go out. I always think when you're cupping, one of the biggest things, and in roasting too actually, is having a sequence and sticking to it. If you get out of sequence, you can get so confused. Now, I'm always worried when I'm cupping, if I do a blind cupping and I've mixed the bags up, I don't want to mix the farmer's bags up because one farmer I'm saying is really bad. Actually, it's really good. I just labeled it wrong.
And I think that's another, to having everything set up before you grind, because that gives you just less chaos when you go to actually put it together.
Yeah.
And then with this, this is a good time to make sure your sheets are ready and to have those and to have that in place, because once we've ground it and it's in the cups, so let's say we're doing 2 coffees, so we've got 5 cups of Guatemala and 5 cups of Ethiopia on one side. We want to now smell the ground coffee.
That's right.
But we don't want to disturb it, do we?
That's right. And that's been a recent thing last few years that I've noticed professionally. Yeah. We will put the cups out and we don't touch the cups with our hand. They are on the table.
Why would touching it affect it at all?
Typically what you do, someone will pick up the cup in their enthusiasm, bring it up to their nose, even give them a little shake and things.
Right.
That little shake, even seems the word little, sometimes the puff of fragrance is gone. The next person that comes doesn't get the same intensity because it's all left in your nose.
Right.
And they don't have it anymore. So we leave the cups on there and we do this thing called bending. We bend over and we go down to the coffee.
Depending on the height of your table.
That's correct. So some of you just going to bend your neck. And you're going to get your nose as close as you can because you want to smell the coffee. And in this particular part where we're talking about the fragrance, which is the dry ground, you're smelling the coffee. And I would say, from my experience and talking to people in the industry, I've heard anywhere between 75 and 80 to 85% of the actual quality of the coffee, you're going to know it through your nose. So this part is often glossed over, but it's probably the part you need to spend time on, learn the language, the descriptive terms, write it down, because this is probably the best time you're going to actually learn and think about that coffee.
And I think it's something we don't often do in our daily consumption of coffee, is to think about the ground coffee. But it is important not to stir it, not to just, take the aroma away from that, for the next person coming, or if you want to smell it again.
That's right.
To kind of look at that. And it is, get your nose in. I know when we've done cuppings together, you'll come up sometimes and your nose will have a little bit of ground coffee on it.
That's right. I don't, if I do that, I have to get my nose really low because these are dry ground, so it's fragrance at this point.
True, I might be thinking of the wet stuff.
You're getting the wet, which is the aroma, which if you get if you get coffee on your nose when it's wet, the water's up the top, that's a good sign in cupping. It's a good sign. You're into it.
So now that we've smelt appropriately, so we haven't disturbed the aroma, but we've smelled the grounds in the cup. The next thing to do is to add the water. So we're going to want to boil that water, and then you have a glass kettle at home where you can see it rolling on the boil. But once it's done boiling, if you can't see the rolling part of that boil, you're going to want to let it sit for a little bit. Correct?
Yeah, once you see the bubbles disperse and start slowing right down, it's, unless you've got a thermometer, which is not a bad idea, but you want it to be like 195, 200 in there, and you need it off the boil. You don't want it boiling, it's just going to scorch and burn the coffee, and you won't smell what the coffee's quality is.
Gotcha. So we definitely want to let that rest for a second. And then you want to pour the water into the cups, and you want to, I think we had talked about earlier, but having multiple people doing that can be helpful because that way you get as much water into all the cups as soon as possible.
At the same time.
An even brewing time.
And at home, that may not, you've just maybe just doing one coffee, which you'll just only have 5 cups. You'll start at the beginning. Really important as you put that first water in with your other hand, you start the timer.
Yeah.
Because this is what you were talking about, the countdown. And this is going to help you guide you through the coffee, and you can't stop once you've pushed the timer.
Right. Lighten the fuse.
Yep.
And is there any specific way we need to pour that water into the cup with the grounds?
I would pour carefully. because the cup is so small. If you go too fast, you've got a big kettle, then or jug as I would call it. It suddenly water can plop out, and suddenly you've got coffee everywhere. Having a little gooseneck or some other pouring instrument may not be a bad idea. Watch the temperature though, because if you've pulled it from the kettle now, it's boiling, off boil. You put it to the gooseneck kettle.
Transfer, yeah,
and then you put it. And if your cups are cold, it's going to change the temperature.
Hugely.
So all these things play into it.
Do we need to swirl or anything like that as we pour it in?
And you do. You just do a very slow turn, circular motion into the cup. And the major thing you're trying to do here is make sure all the grounds are wet. You don't want little pockets of dryness in there.
No,
so you may go around, see, one bit's not. You'll just go over there and make sure water gets poured on it. And you want to bring it right to the top before it overflows. That's pretty. Sometimes it will overflow. That's all right. But you'll get good at this, and you'll stop, and it'll be perfect. And you want each cup of those 5 cups to have the same amount of water. Don't say, saying, I don't need as much in this, or you run out of water. It's another part of the preparation. Make sure you have enough water that you've boiled. I've been there before, and I have to start again.
Going back,
There's not. You got to start again, and you grind everything again because I didn't have enough water in my kettle to boil.
Right, and I think that's a huge thing that I would say be less afraid of making a mess than getting the right amount. It's okay if a little bit goes over.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I've ever been to a cupping that you've been doing that we haven't spilled a little bit. You know what I mean?
I think you're right.
There used to be an old McDonald's, I think it was a McDonald's commercial that said, if it doesn't get all over the place, it doesn't deserve to be in your face.
Whoa.
I think they were talking about the Big Mac. But I think of that with coffee. Like it's kind of like you're going elbow deep into this coffee realm. Mm-hmm. You're going to get into it.
I'm a bit of a nerd sometimes. If at the first cup I spill a little bit, just goes over, I make sure I spill a little bit in the next 4 cups, just so it's all even and standard. That's how important the standardized thing is.
It is, yeah. No, it is crucial. So we've got the hot water in there that's come off the boil. The next thing we're going to want to do is wait 3 to 5 minutes. When you're doing your cupping, Dad, how long are you typically waiting?
I mean, again, if you go to Special Coffee, they will talk between 3 and 5 minutes. We always do 4 and just do the same thing every time.
Right.
4's for us has worked out well, and we get used to that taste. So the next coffee we do next week and next year, it'll be 4 minutes again, and is giving it a fair play, saying this coffee is the same one as last year. It's a different lot. It's grown differently, but we're going to give it 4 minutes, just like we did last year, and to see how it compares.
And my question, have you ever changed that number after years and years of cupping? Have you ever gone and changed the number? Or, I mean, like if you find, you know what, 5 minutes is actually better. Or have you pretty much remained at 4 minutes?
The only time we've changed it is if we've forgotten to push the timer at the beginning. And that's how important that is. You do it.
Yeah.
But our goal is always 4 minutes. And I've been doing it 15 years, and it's always been 4 minutes.
Yeah. And I think that's important because, like you said, if you're comparing coffee from this year as opposed to next year or whatever it is, you want to make sure you're grading it on the same scale. So, fill the cups. And again, you're using cups that are within the measurements that we've already kind of talked about. And so filling the cup means we're getting the correct amount of water because we've also measured the grounds that we're putting in. So we're getting the right ratio. And then while that is brewing or extracting for 4 minutes or anywhere from 3 to 5, and again, that's something to play with.
Yep.
We're going to be smelling the wet ground coffee.
That's right. It's hard to explain this on a podcast in one way, but yeah, you get 3 chances to smell the coffee, and what you're wanting to do, it's going up, up the nasal and going up to your hypothalamus up there, the brain, which is actually, funny enough, the hypothalamus, I don't know too much about this, but it's very close to the memory center, our memories, and therefore smells and memory are very close together, and so what you say is what you remember. And that's what you're trying to do with cupping. You're trying to bring on the experience and remembering was this like last time? How's it different to last time? And you're sort of pulling out of your memory. So that's going up the nasal passage, up towards the hypothalamus up there, and you're smelling the coffee, and voila, you're thinking about the coffee rather than just glazing over. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that's important again, slowing down, thinking about the process. That's the image I was looking for. We've got a bunch of different images here on the table, so if you're listening on the podcast, you won't be able to hear it. But I'll hold it up to the camera here, and I'll put a link to this picture in the podcast notes as well, but it just kind of shows some of the scents or when you're smelling, like you talked about, the different ways we intake that. So once we've smelled that the wet coffee.
Now it's first wet. Now you're talking about aroma. When it's wet, it's aroma now. Changes the gases, how it's working.
Yeah. The next thing we're going to want to do is to break the crust.
Yeah, that's a good term. And it's, as it says, you're breaking through the coffee, and it has formed some sort of a crust on top.
All the ground coffee kind of floats to the top, kind of.
Yeah, it's kind of, some is still down the bottom, and you want to leave the bottom stuff there. You don't want to start stirring the whole cup up, and that will just cause problems.
It's not, you're not stirring your cereal and your
exactly.
And your milk.
And you're not, putting sugar in there and just trying to get it all dissolved. And then no.
What's the right way to stir it then?
Well, keep the. We find to break the crust, you are going to put your spoon that you have, and you're just going to put it like halfway in. So it's, I don't know how you, vertical. So it's, it goes down, it goes halfway in, and you just go one way, whichever way you want. Just keep going 1, 2, 3. That's 360 degrees. You go completely around the top of the cup. Don't let your hand go down and start stirring up stuff that sludge down the bottom there.
No.
Just on the top. And here's the trick, and you'll get better at this, is your nose almost wants to be touching that spoon. Like you say, you're almost going to get coffee on, sometimes you will get coffee on your nose.
Because you're going to be smelling while you're stirring.
That's right, because there's this puff of aroma comes up, and once that puff's gone, it's gone, and you can't come back and do it again.
Right, there's no coming back after that's been done. So you need to make sure you're up close. You're stirring it 3 times around the cup to fully and properly break that crust. And there is going to, like you said, there's that aroma there that you're going to miss if you're not careful.
Mm-hmm. And once you've done that, you can't come back and redo it because it's gone.
Right, it's not going to re-brew in there and puff out again. Then the next thing you want to do is you want to prepare the cup to cup.
That sounds good. Yes, you do. And now you do want to get rid of that crusty layer on top, just on top. And I just exaggerate that a little bit.
Right.
And the best way, 1 spoon's going to be easy. 2 spoons is way easier. And you can look at stuff online or this sort of thing, but you take the 2 spoons at the front on the top of the coffee, and you just sort of scoop them across. And you bring them up and put them into that empty cup that we had at the beginning. It goes in there, and then the spoon will go into your hot water. Mm-hmm. I don't know if we said that. The 2 cups is going to have some of that boiling water. Or
whatever
water.
You have for your extra spoons, you want to make sure that's also hot water. So once you've filled all your cups, go ahead and fill
2 more cups at least with that hot water. And that spoons that you've just scooped across the top, you're going to put it into that empty cup. Bring it out and then just dip it in the hot water. You're just going to rinse it off in case, so when you go to your next cup, you're not cross-contaminating. You're not bringing one flavor to the next cup. Hopefully they're going to be the same flavors.
And this is why we also, you can also use this for wherever you, spit into or put the coffee you don't want to drink. You can also put the crust of the coffee in that as well. If you don't, you may also want to have another cup for that.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, we're going to be rinsing them off in the hot water just to make sure that when we go to the next cup, we're not bringing something from another cup.
And that's something you will do all the time. You'll keep your spoon, and every time you go into the cup and come out of the cup, you'll go into the hot water immediately every time. It's a good habit to get into.
Yeah, even cup to cup in the same coffee is important.
Exactly, important.
So now that we've prepared the cup, so we've got no crust on it, it's brewed for the right amount of time, we've smelled the wet, we've smelled the dry. One other tip I wanted to throw in there, I'm sure that you told me about it, but that it was revolutionary for me, was between smelling things, whether it's dry or it's wet, go ahead and sniff your sleeve.
Yeah, it's actually seems a bit of an odd thing to say, but it's been one, as you said, revolutionary for me. I, funny enough, learnt this when I've been doing my first calibration, first Q grader course.
Yeah. And
it wasn't from the lecturer, not that he taught us too much, but one of the guys mentioned it who was also doing the course with me, and he says, I find if I do this, and I tried it, and he was so correct. When we're doing a triangulation, we're doing cupping, you just smell your sleeve, and your sleeve of your shirt or your clothes doesn't smell so good. Just smell the person next to you. I don't really suggest that, but just to neutralize things, so as you go on to the next cup, it helps a level playing field. You're back to normal again.
It really clears out your smeller.
Yeah.
So that's a really awesome way to do that. And I don't know, for me, sometimes if I go from one coffee to a different coffee, I can smell differences, but without doing that, I don't feel like I get all of the differences.
It's amazing. I hadn't thought of this, but I find it really helpful. Also, a little tip that you can try sometimes is when you're eating something, just put your hand up and block your nose so you can't smell, and see if you can taste the food or the drink that you're having.
Yeah.
And I will guarantee you won't be able to taste it. That's how important the nose is. It's always involved in smelling. We think it's the taste buds, which are involved.
Right.
But it's really your nose that's with your taste buds gives you the smell and able to talk and describe your coffee.
And I think that kind of steps, into a part of cupping where it's not just smelling the dry or the wet, but even while you're just sipping the coffee or slurping it, it's also important to maintain, smelling your sleeve or smelling your arm, that kind of stuff.
That's right. It's interesting that once again, it's if you that diagram you showed us before, the smell goes up to the hypothalamus up there, to the olfactory cells, and that's all part of the nasal odor. But when you actually taste the coffee and it goes over your palate, over your taste buds on your tongue, there's actually some a fragrance or aroma that comes up the back and goes, and they call it retronasal odor. And that also goes up, and that's a third time, if not more, that you can smell it through your brain, through your nose. So you're actually smelling, even though you think you're tasting, you're actually smelling as well, which is why I say hold your nose and see if you can smell.
It's powerful it's amazing how powerful scent is. And we're kind of to the last stage. I don't think we put cleanup in here, but it is a part of that. But before we get there, I labeled in our show notes slurping coffee because I don't know.
We need to talk about it.
So we don't just drink it.
No, you're not at a cafe just sipping your coffee.
And to preface this, temperature. It's like time and temperature are your friends and your enemy because both of them are going to change and you have no control over. And it's going to make it to where the coffee is optimal and good, but it's also going to make it to where it could taste completely different.
That's right. And you want to, professionally, you'd always at least taste the coffee 3 times. And you're going to taste a lot more than 3 times. But temperature-wise, you can taste at least hot, medium, and cold. You don't want to taste it boiling because you just burn your lips and burn your
burn off
taste buds.
But,
Exactly. And you won't taste anything. That's just ruined the whole experience.
Right.
But as you get to the cold part, you're going to notice more things you wouldn't have noticed when it was hot. Defects are particularly going to come out there. And if there's something wrong with that coffee, it's got diesel in there mixed with, you'll notice, I can taste that definitely when it's cold. It's just horrible.
Yeah.
I've never tasted diesel in coffee, by the way.
But you can smell it, which is part of the taste.
There you go.
But so once the temperature is correct, and again, we're going to want to kind of start focusing on the coffee again. We're not just drinking it for enjoyment. We are trying to, at least professionally, trying to grade this objectively. So start looking at your notes again. Start looking at the different categories. And actually, I've got a copy of the sheet that we can link to here. Obviously, anybody listening won't be able to see it, but I've got it on the old camera here. But we've got a sheet here, and there's a bunch of different categories. And so you're going to want to start looking at that again, just to make sure you are remembering what you're tasting for. You're not just tasting for, does this taste good? That's part of it.
That's right. Flavors. If anything, you cup coffee every day, and usually all you're thinking about is the flavor, and even then you're not thinking about the flavor. But there's another 9 categories you need to look for other than flavor. So we're going to be at a future podcast look at going into depth what some of those categories are, whether it's acidity, body, balance, whatever it may be, and so that we can describe that and talk about that the best we can.
Absolutely. Yeah, and so the first thing you want to do is you want to take a spoon, and again, we talked about it in the last episode, but these spoons are going to be, there are special cupping spoons, and if you're doing it professionally, you will be using one of those, silver-plated or gold-plated, to not affect the taste. But you're going to want to take a spoonful of that. And
I always look at, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's always like a polite, when you have a bowl of soup.
It's just a very nice.
And you're very polite, like a New Zealander or an Englishman or Australian would be. And you're going to go in, I think the politeness, and I may not know this to show you that my upbringing may not have been that good, but when you drink a soup, you're going to dip the spoon in forwards, and it's going to be a level. You'll have a level your spoon will be full. The spoon will be full as much as it can take. Then very politely you bring it up to your lips, And that's when the slurp comes on. That's when it goes all horribly wrong. The politeness goes out the window. The louder, more slurpy you can be, the more you're going to spray coffee over your taste buds. But once again, you're going to spray coffee over your taste buds. You're going to have this aroma that's going to go up the nasal passage again, and you're going to smell the coffee through your nose again. And suddenly, but the louder, more you do that, the more chance you're going to, more ability you're going to have to taste and describe the coffee.
Yeah, I mean, if you go to a cupping, which I highly recommend you do.
Yeah, good idea. Good way to start it. You just go to
You'll
cuppings.
hear a bunch of
Yep.
and people will be very loud. And typically, I think of Bruno. Bruno's an
Brazil.
incredible cupper,
Oh, yes.
cupper, and he is a very pronounced slurp, and he does such a good job of really not exfoliating, but just spreading out coffee around his palate, and it's fun to be in the room with him. And do
it is. It's a bit scary to start with. What is going on? It sounds like a 747's taking off beside you.
But you are really going to want to do that.
And as you slurp it, you're getting the force of that. It's also getting oxygen and other things mixing in, and just helps you taste it so much better. I remember actually with Bruno, being in Brazil, tasting those coffees you were talking about before. Brazilians are very good at this.
Yeah.
And you go into a room of tasters with them, and it's almost deafening. You go, what is going on here? They didn't tell me to bring earplugs.
Right. But yeah, this is not a time to be shy. This is a time to really, and it does serve a purpose. I think of it like sticking your thumb over a fire, not a fire hose, but just a regular garden hose, and you get that spray effect. You're doing that over your mouth. Whereas if you just are drinking it, you're not giving your mouth an equal opportunity to taste everything there.
Yeah, and I look at it I sometimes talk about it as a backwards whistle, and where you're whistling through your lips and you purse them up and you usually blow out. But if you blow in, and I can't really do this on a podcast, but your mouth hole is very small, which gives you the pressure, like you're saying, on the hose, and that just allows you to suck in.
Sometimes
incredibly.
I've done it through the gap in my front two teeth here.
There you go.
And it's kind of this little, I don't know if it's good or not, but I can make it really loud.
Oh, well, that's all you need.
But, I mean, it's something to practice. It's something to do. Again, we're not doing it, for a joke. It's a serious, that's how you're going to need to do that. And then, kind of like we had mentioned with the sniffing the sleeve in between them, sometimes you may want to have bread, seltzer water, something that can neutralize your tongue, your palate, and your mouth between tasting coffees.
If you're doing just one coffee with 5 cups,
right,
you're probably going to be all right. But if you're doing more than that, if you're going to go from, as I say, a Sumatran to a Costa Rican coffee, you may want to just grab a little loaf, pluck some bread off that loaf and just swallow that just to neutralize. I was at the Golden Bean competition judging their coffee, and they had a table. It was really quite nice, actually. It was almost my lunch. But they had lots of pieces of bread. They even had some dry crackers there.
Yeah.
Water, seltzer water, as you're saying. Just anything that could help neutralize and just calm down the palate for the next taste.
Well, obviously bread that's going to be very plain, not anything, crazy. Same with crackers. And I think we had talked about this in the episode as well, but come prepared to cup, because you are going to be consuming lots of liquids. You could be eating, you could be standing for a while. So, maybe go to the bathroom before you do it, that kind of thing.
Good idea. Because once you start that clock,
right,
you can't suddenly leave. So,
no, exactly.
Good idea.
So I think those is an important detail that's seemingly obvious.
Have some water nearby so you can just keep yourself hydrated there, and just not only for hydration, but actually for keeping the palate free of flavors you don't want there.
Absolutely. And then once you've done that, you're in that process, you're marking notes, and that's kind of like you said, you want it to taste it hot, medium, and not quite cold, but lukewarm, as it cools. But that's kind of our process for cupping. Past that, it's just taking notes in each stage and being very critical.
I liked
objective.
I liked your suggestion before. Most roasteries, if they should be cupping all their coffees,
right? And again, they may not all have public, but
no, they may do it. Some of them will be doing public cuppings. You go to sometimes you have to pay for them, sometimes you don't, which is but you could ask, when you cup this roasting day today, could I just come in for 10 minutes and see how you do that? Because that sounds so exciting. And it is exciting. That's part of cupping. It's fun.
Coffee people are nice people.
I agree.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of an overview of them, or a little more in depth into the actual procedure of it. In a future episode, we're going to kind of talk or deconstruct kind of the different things you're tasting for. But that's kind of the procedure. And again, the episode previous was more of an overview of the process as well. So hopefully we'll get more in depth in the next episode. But thank you so much for listening or for watching or however you consumed this content. We actually, you know what? We enjoyed some nice elevator coffee today. We didn't actually, we made it, and it was so good that we drank it before.
It was gone.
We were going to do it while we were drinking.
Thank you, Cole.
Yeah, thank you, Cole. We were going to drink it on the podcast, but it was too good. We drank it all. But again, thank you so much for making it this far. You are at the end of the podcast episode. But thank you so much. Bye.